He's one of the most polarising figures of modern times, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. This week he was back in the headlines again after it was confirmed that Australia is now providing him with some consular assistance following a visit from two officials from the High Commission in London. Is it a sign that there may be a breakthrough in the case, which has lasted almost 8 years and began with a Swedish arrest warrant in 2010?
Well, we're about to speak with Julian's lawyer, Jennifer Robinson, who was at that meeting. But first, let's take a look back at how this story has unfolded.
This is the Ecuadorian embassy in London, which has been Julian Assange's home since 2012. He was granted diplomatic asylum there after the UK ordered his extradition to Sweden for questioning over alleged sexual assaults. Assange denied those accusations, saying they were part of a smear campaign and a bigger plot to see him face charges in America.
The United States must renounce its witch hunt against WikiLeaks. The United States must dissolve its FBI investigation.
Since its creation in 2006, the controversial whistleblowing website has published a huge number of classified US government files, including Hillary Clinton's emails during the 2016 presidential campaign, which led to a massive fallout.
That the FBI, as part of our counterintelligence mission, is investigating the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election.
Those activities have kept Assange on America's most wanted list. Then a breakthrough. Last year, Swedish prosecutors dropped their rape case.
7 years without charge. Why my children grew up without me. That is not something that I can forgive. It is not something that I can forget.
Now there may be a glimmer of hope. Officials from the High Commission have visited Julian for what's believed to be the first time in nearly 6 years. It's a possible first step towards freedom. And joining us from London is Julian Assange's lawyer, Jennifer Robinson. Good morning to you, Jen. We really appreciate your time. Now, this visit this week has been significant. What sort of consular assistance has there been from Australia to this point?
Well, the answer is very little. It's been more than 6 years since Julian has had a visit from Australian officials. And the question is not just about consular assistance. The question is actually about what diplomatic representations Australia is willing to provide for an Australian citizen who is in an incredibly serious situation. Of course, he sought asylum in the embassy almost 6 years ago. It's 6 years he's been inside that embassy in 2 weeks' time. And the reason he went in there and the reason that this case has been so controversial is because of the risk to US extradition and because Australia, the UK and Sweden refused to seek assurances from the United States to protect him from that risk of extradition. He remains inside the embassy today because of that risk, and it's only gotten worse over the years. We've now seen, since the Trump administration came to power, the director of the CIA saying that they are going to take down WikiLeaks, that they will find a way to prosecute him and they will not offer him the protections under the First Amendment, constitutional free speech protections. This is an incredibly serious situation. We're looking at an Australian citizen who's been under some form of restriction on his liberty for more than 7.5 years without charge. And what we would like to know is when the Australian government, who is uniquely placed to try and seek a resolution to this case, is going to step forward and provide assistance.
Jennifer, he's been inside the embassy since 2012. Has he stepped foot outside the embassy at all? Out the back door, one step, anything?
No, the only pictures you've seen on the balcony I could count on one or two hands. There is no outdoor area. There is no outside area where he can be in the sunlight. There's no outside area where he can exercise. The British government has refused to allow him to go outside even for exercise purposes to seek medical treatment. And we've had a group of British doctors assess him recently and say that his mental and physical health is at extreme risk and are calling on the British Medical Association to take steps to put pressure on the British government to ensure he can have his healthcare taken care of. It's hard, I think, for anyone to imagine what it can be like, but he has been effectively in a ground floor flat with no outside access for 6 years. I just don't think anyone can imagine what that's like.
No. What would happen if he did leave?
The British authorities have said that he would be arrested to face potential bail proceedings related to his decision to seek asylum inside the embassy. He is more than willing to face British justice, but not at the risk of facing American injustice. So if he were to walk out without an assurance against US extradition, in circumstances where the Trump administration have said that prosecuting him is a priority, he would be arrested, put into prison, and then we expect that there would be a sealed indictment from the US that would be executed, and he could be in prison again for many years facing extradition.
Okay.
So what we would like to see is the Australian government seek the assurance that is required to bring the situation to an end.
OK, he's effectively a prisoner, though, now, Jen. The fact that he could go to US and be a prisoner again, but at least he'd be serving out a term.
But let's think about what would he be serving out a term for. He's facing extradition and prosecution for his publishing activities with WikiLeaks. This is an organisation that won the Sydney Peace Prize for its work, that's won the Walkley Award for most outstanding contribution to journalism. Why should he be extradited to face prosecution for publishing activities which are protected under the First Amendment and protected under free speech laws here, indeed, and in Australia? This is a very serious situation. The WikiLeaks alleged source, Chelsea Manning, faced cruel and unusual treatment in prison, and the situation that he would be facing in the US is one that no one should stand for. And I don't think that any other Australians, no right-thinking and decent Australians, would like to see a fellow Australian citizen extradited to the US to face that kind of treatment.
Well, Jennifer, the only thing on that, though, is he's been inside for 2 administrations, so you can't blame this on Trump and the Trump administration, because Obama was in power when he first went in there and still he wouldn't come out. So what would you say about that?
Well, this has been a risk. The grand jury and the criminal investigation was opened by the Obama administration, and that continued throughout the Obama administration, even though there are clear free speech reasons why this criminal investigation ought to be stopped. But what we've seen since Trump came to power are far more public statements by a number of officials, including the US Attorney General, including the director of the CIA, saying that they are going to take WikiLeaks down and prosecuting is a priority. It's a far more public and aggressive stance than the Obama administration ever took. And it's time that the Australian government and the UK government stand up against that risk.
But Jennifer, can you blame any government for not wanting their state secrets published?
Of course, there are circumstances in which secrecy for governments are important, but WikiLeaks publications have been incredibly important in revealing what journalists the world over, and including in the numerous awards they've won, for demonstrating human rights abuse, corruption, and corruption in diplomatic relationships around the world. These are incredibly important disclosures, and I think that they've been recognised in the awards that they've won. I think it's a great public service and one that many around the world have recognised. So should a publisher who has been responsible for providing this information that's been used in human rights cases around the world, that's admissible as evidence before the courts here in Britain and elsewhere, should that person face prosecution for having provided us the benefit of that material? And the answer is, of course not.
What needs to happen to end the stalemate then, Jen?
The same thing that we've been asking for more than 7.5 years, which is an assurance against extradition to the United States. This is a completely standard procedure in cases around the world. The UK could have insisted on it when he faced extradition to Sweden. The Swedish case has since been dropped. It's the only reason that he's inside the embassy. And if the Australian government would come to the fore and help to resolve this situation, he could come out of there at any time.
OK, Jen, just about you. You're an Australian. You were born and bred in the New South Wales Southern Highlands. You're living in London now, and you represent Julian pro bono. Why?
I think all Australians feel, well, at least as an expat Australian being abroad, that we have an obligation to help each other. And in circumstances, certainly where there's a fellow Australian who's in incredibly difficult circumstances, cut off from his family, far away from home, our own government not doing anything to help him, in circumstances where he's taken incredibly principled decisions to provide a public service to us in terms of the information that we need to better understand the way that governments act and behave, to document human rights abuse. How can we not help him? How could you let an Australian be in this awful situation and not do something about it? And that's why I find the Australian government's position entirely unacceptable, and one that makes me ashamed to be Australian.
Jennifer, thanks for your time this morning. We wish you all the best.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.